what's going on in the West Asia. We know that the attacks are happening. As we know, the United States is attacking southern part of Iran, western part of Iran. Iran is reacting and retaliating. And in 2 days ago, we've seen a new sort of a strategy on the part of Iranians without being attacked. They're attacking some facilities in Jordan. This is
Yes.
something new on the part of Iran, because basically since the war started, it was all about the United States attacking Iran and Iranian retaliating, the Iranian retaliation. And right now you see Iran is just going somehow preemptive on with these attacks. And one of the main means of Iranians in the hand of Iranians is these missiles that they're using, drones and missile, a combination of both.
Yes.
And what do we know about? I know that you have information on the Iranian missiles that you want to share with us.
Sure.
What do we know about those missiles as time goes by? And it seems Donald Trump today, he said the war would continue and there is no end, to this war happening anytime soon. Go ahead and let us know what is new.
I think the attacks on Jordan, the Jordanian U.S. military bases in Jordan, it's not. I don't think the intent is to attack Jordan. It's to attack the U.S. military bases in Jordan. The United States has no choice but to pull back its aircraft from the Persian Gulf, because they're so vulnerable in the actual Persian Gulf military bases, and the Jordanian air bases has been one of those places where they're trying to pull back these airplanes. So that's a naturally high value target for the Iranians to focus on, and of course because they do have quite good satellite reconnaissance, and I think probably drone reconnaissance as well. They are able to identify locations on the Jordanian bases where where target location. That is to say, I'll call it ground zero points, where they can hope to do significant damage to American capabilities, including American air power. And I haven't had time to analyze what's available in the satellite photos. What I have seen suggests to me that a large part of the damage has actually been done by drones rather than ballistic missiles, although ballistic missiles have certainly been used. And my guess is, and as I'll show, the damage from those can be quite a lot higher from the drones, although the drones are more than enough, because if you hit an aircraft shelter with a drone, and they're fragile aircraft within the shelter, you're going to damage or destroy the aircraft. And if you damage a lot of these aircraft, they're basically gone. I mean, maybe they can be repaired, but it would take months. So, these aircraft, especially something like an F-35, it's got all these coatings on it, and for stealth, and you can't do light damage to this thing and keep it. If you do light damage, you're going to keep it from flying, so it's essentially lost as an American attack asset. So it looks like they've been doing significant damage in Jordan. And I expect that the levels of damage are going to increase significantly over time. The Iranian, there's a lot of foolish what's new? There's a lot of foolish statements coming out of American leadership. This Admiral Cooper, I guess, he's the second in command at the Middle East Command, sent, I guess, just the other day was talking about starting another 2-week bombing campaign to, stop the the use of all these drones and ballistic missiles against American targets. But it's just a silly statement, because question number one is, given that we had this tremendous initial campaign against Iran, why didn't we do it then? The reason is simple. We can't get at these facilities. The military facilities are underground, and they're not only underground, some of them, of course, are very deep underground, and there's no way of getting, probably not even with a nuclear weapon, at some of these facilities. And you also have the problem of the tunnels. And many of these tunnels are, of course, in mountains, and they're, of course, very deep. But many tunnels are in areas that are basically flat land, where there's been tunnels built underneath it. And those tunnels may be shallow enough that if you knew exactly where they were located, you might, with a powerful enough specialized munition, be able to cave in the ceiling. That doesn't mean, incidentally, the tunnel is no longer in use, because it's only a section of the tunnel. And these tunnels have they're big, and they contain a large amount of equipment, including ground moving equipment. So, you punch a hole in it somewhere, the Iranians can easily come in and move the debris away. And I don't know if they would, but they could even potentially launch missiles from the holes, after they remove the debris. I mean, there's some tunnels, tunnel entrances, that have been attacked tens of times. And the Iranians have still been launching missiles from those tunnel entrances. And the reason for that is very easy. You come in with a weapon, you damage, maybe even heavily damage, the tunnel entrance. The Iranians have earth-moving equipment. Obviously, they built these tunnels, and these are gigantic engineering achievements, and they have equipment to move dirt around and debris. So they clear the debris, and maybe they clear the debris in a few hours or less. You can't be there all the time, because aircraft have time on station. They have fuel limitations, and they also can't just loiter around and wait, because they become juicy targets for air defenses. And the air defense doesn't have to be good enough to deny them access all the time. It just has to be good enough to threaten that they could be shot down at any time. So you just can't sit around, and thumb your nose at the Iranians. You want to get in, take advantage of what air defense cover you can get from jamming and surprise, and get out. You can't just sit there and stand around and loiter. You're asking to be shot at and shot down. So the Iranians have enough air defense capability, and it's not insignificant. It's that they can deny the Americans any ability to loiter, although there wouldn't surprise me, although I haven't any data on this, but it wouldn't surprise me if the airplanes do not have the fuel to loiter. I mean, they don't have the fuel on a given mission, but they have to come back and be refueled. They have to be refueled in the air or refueled at their bases. And there's a question about how much fuel the United States has to maintain aircraft in the air for extended periods of time. So the operational advantages that the Iranians have relative to the Americans are very substantial. And it's extremely unfavorable for the Americans to prevent launches by the Iranians, because you can't be there all the time. It's just that simple. And you have lots of aircraft, but it's not that many relative to the coverage time that's required. And so I don't see there's any practical way for stopping the Iranians from continuing to launch ballistic missiles. Now, Admiral Cooper shows either a very high level of indiscretion or ignorance of his own weapon systems. I don't know which, but one of the things that is required of an officer, of any officer, no matter what the level of command they're in, is the ability to understand the capabilities of their forces, as well as the capabilities of the adversary. So I just by happen to have been reading about the American Constitution. It's a warship we had, the Americans had in the War of Independence, and then more importantly, because of timing, in the War of 1812 against the Brits. And it was a very brilliantly constructed ship. It used timber from the United States, which was selected because of its high density. The British ships were built with timber that was available to Britain, very high quality that was available, but it was Douglas fir from the Baltics and Baltic states, and whereas the Americans were getting much higher quality, higher density wood from the United States, from Virginia. And by very cleverly constructing the ship with layers of different kinds of wood, it turned out that the British 16-pound cannons could not penetrate the hull at certain ranges of the Constitution. Now, the officer in command of the Constitution understood this. That's part of understanding your own weapon system. So he would allow the Brits to get in range where they could attack the Constitution, but they didn't have the firepower. The guns were not able to penetrate the hull and do damage. But his guns, which were 24-pounders, could damage at the same range, could damage the British ships. And he was doing horrendous damage to the British by just allowing them to get to a certain range where they could fire. So he sucked them in, and then he did tremendous damage to them because of this particular advantage. Now, why doesn't Admiral Cooper understand this about his own weapon systems? I mean, this is, of course, a historic situation, hundreds of years old, but a general officer is supposed to have the kind of general knowledge of their military capabilities, which is why they're supposed to be promoted to that rank. Because if you're a lower rank officer and you only have experience commanding a brigade, for example, or a division, you don't have the vast experience that a general officer is supposed to have to understand the whole range of capabilities and limitations your forces have relative to your adversary. That's why officers have to come up, if it's a well educated military, these officers come up from very low ranks. That's not because it's some system of hazing simply. It's because as a lieutenant, you get an understanding of the weapons you have at your hand and the capabilities of your adversary and how to utilize tactics within the limitations of your command, the kinds of weapons you have available to you. When a general officer makes statements that are incredibly ill-informed, to me, it's a great concern. Now, maybe you can dismiss Admiral Cooper's statements as political, but if that's the case, then he's out of bounds, because his job is not to be a politician. His job is to manage our military forces, American military forces, so that we can meet the military objectives that we have set for ourselves. Now, of course, the problem with the American strategy at this time is we have no strategy. We can't. We attacked Iran without a strategy. We started a war that anybody who had actually assessed the situation carefully from a military perspective would have said immediately that we cannot win this. We can't win this. And what we're seeing is the consequence of extraordinarily ill-considered and ignorant, militarily ignorant decisions. Whether or not you're against Iran or against the United States or for the United States, there's a military equation that both sides have to look at. And the brilliant applications of military technology available has been done by Iran. Iran knew what it was doing right from the beginning, and it did tremendous damage to the American air and missile bases in the Gulf, and also in Israel. And it also took out the bulk of the air defense and missile defense radar systems, which left the United States naked to even early warning. In other words, the missile defenses have not worked right from the beginning. This is a gigantic fraud on the American people. And it's also a fraud on our own military if these people actually believe these missile defenses work. One of the problems with a propaganda system that is internally politicized. I mean, I have some contacts at the Pentagon, and one of the things I learned is that people who are in the loop or think they're in the loop are not being told that the Patriot is not a functioning anti-ballistic missile system. They're given charts, and when I ask them, have you seen any data? They haven't. There's been no data. Now, this is what happened in the Gulf War of 1991. In the Gulf War of 1991, our own military did not know that the system was not functioning. There were certain people who knew. The contractor knew. I'm going to make a digression at this point, and just to show you what the contractor did to the United States, to our own people. And can you pull up slide 21 from my slide deck? Can you easily do that?
Yeah.
Okay, here it is. Here it is. This is a 2-page advertisement. So you had to open up the magazine on 2 pages. So page against page during the 1991 Gulf War. It was published in Aviation Week and Space Technology. It's a Raytheon advertisement. If you just read the text, that's the white text, when a system does everything in combat it was designed to do and more, that's proof of performance. Okay, so here, this is what's called a time-lapse photo. That is to say, what happens is the camera is open. In this case, I would guess the camera was open for about 20 seconds. So the camera is open, it's looking at a dark sky, it's collecting light. And so when a Patriot is launched, it has a bright rocket motor plume. And so since the camera is open for a long time, and the plume, if you're looking at it at a given moment, you see it as a bright point of light. But that bright point of light traces out its powered flight trajectory. So the Patriot burns for about 12 seconds. So what you see, these two lines rising up from the ground, are the powered flight profiles of the Patriot, up to about 12 seconds of the time the aperture was open. Then you see up to the left two bright dots. Those bright dots are the explosions of the Patriot warhead. In other words, there are two Patriots that were launched. One Patriot explodes first, and then the next Patriot explodes behind it, and there's no target there. What's happening? Well, we also got that. We also got that engagement on video. So let's look at the next slide. So in the next slide, we see both of the detonations. The top two rows are two slides. This is from a video camera, so we're seeing it in real time. So we see the upper line. We see an explosion of a Patriot. That's not a hit on the Scud warhead. It's the explosion of a large warhead that's in the Patriot PAC-2 interceptor. The PAC-3 interceptor does not have a big warhead. It tries to destroy its target by physically hitting it. So there's no big warhead in it, but the PAC-2 tries to destroy the target by exploding a warhead. So you can see the Scud warhead is visible, and the PAC-2 missed the warhead. If we look at the line below, we see the second attempt to destroy the Scud. So what should the time-lapse image show? Well, let's look at slide 23. Here's my rendition of what that slide should show. What that slide should show, so this is my drawing in what it should show. There should be a faint line of that warhead tracing out its trajectory. You can see it. You can see the explosions. You can see the Patriot powered flight. So you should see the trail of the warhead as the warhead moves. It's bright. It's a bright point of light, and it's moving through the field of view of the camera. And you should see a trace of where the warhead was. You can't tell where it was at a given time, but you can see that. Somebody knew what they were doing and airbrushed the trail of the warhead out of the photograph, out of the time-lapse photo. So this is a fraud at multiple levels. We know that the warhead went to the ground and exploded. We have photographs of the crater. I won't bother showing you here, but we have photographs of the crater that this warhead made, where it landed and exploded. So we know it came to the ground and exploded. We know there were two Patriot attempts to hit it, and they were missed. And we know that this is a time-lapse photograph that has been doctored to look like, to leave an impression that something happened. This is fraud, plain and simple. You know, Raytheon wants to say they didn't know that the system wasn't. Now the news story is, when we discovered this, they were fighting us tooth and nail. They were saying we were frauds. They tried to. They actually made an allegation that we were doctoring the videos. It was really quite interesting. Well, terrifying too, because going up against a multi-billion-dollar company. But this company was lying every inch of the way. Now they have changed the history. Now, if you look at the history of the Gulf War of '91, they say, "Well, we thought it was working, but we were wrong. We didn't quite understand," or something like that. It's not true. What they were doing was lying. They knew exactly what was happening, and they were the press was misreporting, just as it's now misreporting. I just saw a CNN report where the reporter says, "Well, they're intercepting 95% of the ballistic missiles." What is this guy talking about? I was on I was showing people videos that showed 1 or 2% at most is the intercept rate. I mean, how can that be the case? So the press is just journalistically brain dead. You'd think that one of these guys, I mean, why are they talking to General Keegan and General Kellogg, but not to Professor Theodore Postol, who has a proven record of being right on all these things that you can find in the history books, in the analytical work? It's not as if I'm some quack that has been shown over the years to not have been correct. And yet these people in the press, they just don't even think of calling me or asking me anything. Now, I'm not insulted by this. I think it reflects on them, not me. But this is the quality of journalism we have today. It's incredible. So anyway, so we are not getting accurate information at all from the press today, and organizations like CNN are just simply not doing their job. And certainly, organizations like the New York Times and other organizations are also in that category. So the question is, if we look again at slide 1, go back to slide 1 to the question. I'm hoping to. Is what are the real weapons capabilities in the 2026 war as things go on? In other words, we know that the Patriots are not working. So the fact that Zelensky has asked for 300 Patriots for Ukraine, even if we gave them, it would be silly. It wouldn't provide any help at all. It won't provide any help to the Israelis because they cannot intercept ballistic missiles. What they can do, they can intercept drones. And the reason is the crossing speeds against a drone are very low, and a Patriot interceptor can easily sense that it's passing by the drone and damage the drone or hit the drone because the drone is traveling so slowly. What's happening with a ballistic missile, though, is they're crossing at such high speeds that the interceptor cannot see the target missile before to maneuver. Before it doesn't have time to maneuver. So by the time it sees them, it can't do anything, and it just flies by and misses. That's what's going on with a very fast, high crossing speed. I can talk about that later if we have time or if people are interested. But let's talk about something else that's important, which is the damage inflicting capability of the Iranian Al-Fatah ballistic missiles. These ballistic missiles are cleverly designed so that they can deliver the explosive power that is maybe 3 or 4 times larger than their actual explosive payload. In other words, they have a 500 kilogram nominal explosive warhead. Well, they're in fact delivering the explosive effects of a 2,000 kilogram warhead, or 2,500 kilograms, and I'll explain why that's the case. So even though the warhead is only 500 kilograms, it's in terms of the explosive yield, it's 1,000 kilograms in weight, but 500 kilograms in explosives. Why don't we just look at slide 2? You can see in the lower image, the warhead is separated. And if we go to slide 3, you can actually see the warhead with a man standing next to it, so you can get a sense of its size. And what makes this warhead so special are 2 things. If we go to the next slide, we can focus on those 2 things. The first thing is it has wings on it. So what those wings can do is it can cause the warhead to develop an angle of attack by just twisting the wings a bit. And when the warhead is coming into the atmosphere, it's subjected to very high aerodynamic forces. So if you give it a little angle of attack, it can maneuver. It develops lift very easily. And so if the warhead knows where it is, and I'll discuss that very shortly. If the warhead knows where it is, and it knows where the target is, or it knows where it wants to be, then it can maneuver as long as it knows where it is. Well, this warhead does know where it is because it has information from the Chinese Beidou navigation satellite system. The Beidou system is not jammable like GPS is. So the Americans can't turn off the navigation capability of this incoming warhead because it's receiving satellite signals from a system that's not subject to jamming. There's a whole discussion. I can actually talk about that at some other time with people, because this is of profound importance. So this warhead easily knows its location to a meter or so in 3 dimensions. So when it re-enters the atmosphere, it knows where it is exactly, and it knows where the target is. So it knows how to maneuver to the target because it can change its direction. Now, the other feature this warhead has is it has a rocket motor. And you can see in this diagram, the rocket motor is taken out and shown in front of you. Now, this rocket motor can develop a couple of 1,000 pounds of thrusts for 20 or 30 seconds easily, probably more than that. But given the high thrust capability that this warhead has, it can be prevented from slowing down from aerodynamic drag. So you would keep, if this were purely controlled by aerodynamic drag, if it didn't have a rocket motor in it, it would hit the ground at maybe 3 kilometers per second. That's roughly the speed at which an Oreshnik submunition hits the ground. Now, an Oreshnik submunition, when it hits the ground, it comes in so fast that its dead weight, even if it has no explosives in it, gets crushed up. It gets crushed up so fast that it becomes like a high. In other words, the munition gets crushed up so fast, it becomes super hot. All of the kinetic energy of its motion goes into crushing up the non-explosive pieces of the warhead, and it heats to a temperature of maybe 5,000 degrees Kelvin. Well, that's close to the temperature of the surface of the sun. So this warhead comes in, it interacts with the ground, very quickly crushes up, gets super hot. Since it's super hot, it explosively disassembles, so it acts like an explosive warhead. And it's a little bit different because it's a little asymmetric in its explosion, so maybe the craters are a little deeper, but it's not penetrating the ground to great depths like people incorrectly assume. But it's like its equivalent weight in high explosives, in TNT.